Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
Shout out here to MimC313 saying, hey, it's Pindown time. Guys, if you're tuning in live, first of all, thank you as always. We really appreciate those. We appreciate the live comments, the conversation that we get to have. It's kind of unique. It's a lot of fun. And of course, give us the like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. It really helps us grow, so we appreciate that as well. But Blake, before we get going, I just wanted to ask you, what's like one cool or fun Christmas holiday tradition that your family has that you guys do every year?
Man, we actually normally do a trip. So now that we have a baby in the mix, we're still trying to do it. Get him used to it.
Can't go running away to Africa, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was kind of my last hurrah last year, and an incredible trip. So yeah, we're going to California this year. I'll still be here on Christmas because we're doing the just whole family Christmas at home and with my wife's family and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think we're gonna start though, like now that we have a kid in the mix, doing the whole matching pajamas cringy thing. We haven't got that in motion yet, but now we're like, my wife and I are trying to like start our own traditions just to make everything special and decorate the house a little bit more than we have in years in the past. So in that infancy stage right now of our new family traditions. How about you?
For me, one of my favorites, I'd have to go all the way back actually to the weekend right after Thanksgiving. Every year, so we have Thanksgiving, and then the kickoff of the Christmas season is that Saturday, where we drive out to a Christmas tree farm, cut down some real Christmas trees, and come home with them, decorate them all up. And that whole weekend is like all the lights go up. Obviously the tree gets up and decorated, do all the outdoor stuff. So it's a lot of fun. That's one of my favorites. But I was just thinking as you were trying to explain, maybe trying to do new, fun, kind of cute ones, right? For just your guys' family. My wife's family growing up, every year they had a song that they would sing as they go down the stairs. So to start off Christmas Day, there's this little tune. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they gather everyone, parents, kids, everyone there at the top of the stairs, and then sing the song as they go slowly down the stairs, and then they go open up the presents. So pretty cute tradition there.
Wow. I have not heard that one before. So definitely a unique one. What does your wife think about it? Did she love it?
She loves
Did
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
We still do it now. Like, so when both my wife's family and my family, we both grew up in the Chicago area. So we travel back to the Chicago area for Christmas, right? And so we ended up splitting the day. Her family does stuff in the morning and early afternoon. My family always did stuff late afternoon and then into the evening. So generally we do Christmas morning with her family and then Christmas late afternoon, evening with my family. And so that means quite literally like our day begins on Christmas with me too, standing up at the top of the stairs and singing the song as we go down.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You're gonna have to send me a video if it's a thing that's videotaped ever.
Well, I'm just saying, you're already doing the pajamas thing. How adorable would that be if it's the same pajamas and then all of you guys are going down the stairs singing the song? I mean, you can't top that.
I'll have to throw it over to my wife and get her thoughts. Maybe as the family grows eventually, that sounds like a good one. Because hey, if it's just me and my wife singing right now, I'm not sure if we'd be very good at harmonizing.
I was just thinking, you're probably sitting over there going, "Oh no!" Like you just gave my wife the worst idea.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she would love it.
As
Anything
well,
Christmas, she's down for.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a good thing. It's fun.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say apologies to any of our audio listeners. I'm gonna try and be on top of the mute, but I got a little bit of a head cold, something upper respiratory. So if I cough or if my voice sounds weird, that's why. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to stick on the flu game for real. Flu game for real. But we did get quite a bit of questions this week. So we figured we just kind of dive right into it. This first one here is from our guy Bobby Bucket. Says, when should we worry about Isaiah Stewart's durability long term? He hasn't exceeded more than 50 games played the last 2 seasons, and now he's hurt again.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there was some good chatter about it in the DBB comments, like along with this question. And one of the points that stood out to me was just the fact that Stu plays super hard. Like, he's sort of getting in the mix of like, I feel like he's probably more exposed to injuries than other players would be that just have different roles or don't play as hard as him, because not that many players play as hard as Stu does. I don't think it's a strength and conditioning thing or anything, because that's like one of the strongest dudes in the league. So like, I'm not super worried about it, but I think it's going to happen every now and then, just because of the role he plays. And also, when he was missing games like the past 2 years, specifically, I think most of it was towards the end of the season when he got shut down a bit, when the team wasn't competing for much and trying to get as many ping pong balls as possible. So I think it's an interesting point to bring up, but I'm not really concerned in the long run, even though I think it will probably be something that Stu sees throughout his career.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I mean, my initial reaction was that, look, if it happens again this season, you've got a real solid trend, right? That's definitely maybe a player that's a little bit more prone to injuries. Maybe that's because of how physically he plays, or just because he's a smaller guy physically, right? He's physically smaller. I know he's real built and strong, but he plays lower to the ground too, so sometimes that can come with some different challenges. But the question I wanted to ask you was, look, okay, let's say that this is a thing, right? Let's say that Isaiah Stewart, you could really only bank on playing 60% of the season or so. He's probably going to be dealing with some off and on injuries the rest of the way. How important is that? I mean, he's on a pretty cheap contract, all things considered, and he's playing your backup 5. Like, is that something that should be like a major red flag, or maybe just you live with it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you live with it because of what he brings to the team when he is on the floor. And I mean, I think that, I don't know if it's going to come this season or next season. Like, there's definitely going to be some tinkering around, like names coming in and out for just the front court in general. So, I mean, I think the Pistons got a little bit maybe lucky, maybe not, because I'm not sure what the market was with bringing in Paul Reed as their third big, just because he might even be overqualified. He had a great game against the Jazz last night. So I just think as long as whoever the starting center is, whether it's Jalen Duren, whether it's someone else, whether Stu starts, Duren comes off the bench, like, I think that no matter what, and it's not even just if Isaiah Stewart gets hurt, it's if Jalen Duren can't stay on the floor, either of them gets in foul trouble. I think as long as they have a third big that you're comfortable putting on the floor, I think you just live with it, because I think it's going to happen no matter who you have out there, essentially.
That's a great point. And those third bigs, right? Those guys that are on league minimum deals that, or maybe just a little bit above that, but are generally playing, passable NBA big minutes, right? For on a good day, 15, 14 a night, right? Due to injury stuff. Like, those guys are pretty common. You can find quite a bit of them. You could probably go out into free agency right now and grab a guy that, like, if you had to put into the rotation at the 5, it wouldn't sink the ship. You know what I mean? I think I do tend to agree with you that maybe that's just one of those things. Isaiah Stewart he's a very good player. He's a very good backup 5-man. He could play a little bit down to the 4-2 off the bench. And if he's only giving you, 50, 55 games a year, then yeah, you just want to make sure you don't have a total developmental piece as that third big. You might want just a a vet who can come in and not ruin everything when someone gets hurt.
Yeah, and Stu isn't like the archetype or prototype for this, but like why do teams not want to draft centers in the top 5? It's because of injury concerns. And I mean, even if you have a top 10 maybe lottery pick, there are some outliers obviously that you'll take a swing on. But the bigs get hurt. Like I think as long as you find a good one and one you're comfortable with playing, like obviously it can't be a situation where they're not playing more often than they are, but I just think these things are going to pop up and you sort of have to live with it, unfortunately.
So speaking of that injury, let's go to this question from I like to ride bikes.
I love that. I love this
yeah.
name, by the way. Like, I think his question was actually answered in the DVB comments, but I added it just because I wanted to talk about this username.
It's a fantastic username, and we get to reminisce about that short period of time where Dwight Pikes was just an impactful backup point guard for the Pistons. That was a lot of fun. Good times. But anyway, so here's the question. Why is there no news on Isaiah Stewart's knee? Any Stewart updates to that injury? It looks like it was hyperextended and that he's day-to-day. But do you have anything more to build on that one?
No, that was it. I mean, I've just seen like what everyone else has. I think it's day-to-day at this point, which is good. Like the hyperextension didn't look good by any means. So I'm happy that it doesn't seem serious and hopefully he's back soon.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add on to that is when I saw the play happen live, I was thinking Stewart's out for a month. Like it didn't look it didn't look good at all. So to have it only be day to day after one of the most obvious hyperextensions of the knee I've ever seen. Like I am not a doctor. I have absolutely no medical expertise. And when I watched it live, I went, crap, he just hyperextended his knee. He's going to be out for a while. The fact that it's day to day and maybe he's back next week, maybe the week after, like just a small time period. That's huge. That's huge. And since we keep talking about big men, let's go over to Paul Reed, who, like you said, did have a fantastic game against the Jazz. And maybe we could use this question to talk about that a little bit, because I thought that Marcus Sasser, and Ron Holland really changed the tide against the Utah Jazz. But here's our question from Shags in the DBB comments. It says, how bad of a deal did Paul Reed really get? While he lost money, he actually got his contract guaranteed 2 to 3 weeks early and can't be traded this season. So before we answer that, why don't we take a minute and explain exactly what happened to Paul Reed with all of the cap mechanics?
Yeah, so the Pistons waived Paul Reed, and then they had to get back to the salary floor because that transaction brought them under a certain salary floor. So they signed Javonte McCoy, who plays for the Motor City Cruise. He's not one of the two-way players. I believe he's had a cup of coffee in the NBA with the Spurs. Maybe I could be wrong on that. They signed him to get to the salary floor. And then the plan, none of us saw it, but the plan was always to re-sign Paul Reed to a minimum deal. So they waived Javonte McCoy the next day. He got paid nicely, I think so, like 35 grand for that day for being on a standard NBA deal, and then re-signed Paul Reed to a minimum deal, which got them back above the salary floor. So a bunch of cap mechanics that I didn't really know what was going on while any of the moves were happening. But yeah, I think on the surface, you can look at it and be like, oh, the Pistons wanted to pay Paul Reed less. But like Shags brings up here, he was playing on a non-guaranteed contract. He gets a minimum deal, but it's guaranteed through the season. And he was playing on that non-guaranteed contract for up until this season. So he gets paid like those game checks before that contract was waived and null and void, and he starts playing on the new one. So although it seems like he got a pay cut, like I don't think he really did. Like, I think it was a win-win all around. It kept Paul Reed in Detroit. The Pistons opened up some cap space, and one of the G League guys got a little bit of extra money, which they all deserve.
Did Paul Reed, before this contract, did he have some sort of option going into next season? I thought that there was one, but I can't remember for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd have to look up his deal to know for sure. I just remember it was such a weird contract. Like,
Yeah, it really
the
was.
Sixers needed to make, what was it, the second round or the conference finals for it to become guaranteed or something like
Yeah.
that. So it was just all over the place. It was a 3-year, $24 million deal that had a bunch of strange options and everything on it. So,
Okay.
it,
So yeah, so a 3-year deal. When was that signed?
um, I was just on his transactions, in 2023. So before
So yeah.
last season.
Okay, yeah. So then he would have still had some sort of thing, potentially non-guaranteed deal for this upcoming year too.
Hmm.
Um, so that's where I was initially going to kind of go with this, because I'm with you. I don't think Paul Reed got a bad deal at all. Not only does his contract get guaranteed, right? So he's not taking that much of a cut. His contract gets guaranteed. He's locked in for the rest of the season. But now he's got flexibility next off season too. He can
Hmm.
play his way into a bigger contract with someone else. He doesn't have to go through the, will the Pistons guarantee my money? Will they not? Will the Pistons only guarantee part of it and then cut me late? And this provides a lot of certainty and flexibility for him, while not being a substantial decrease in his salary whatsoever. So, like, I totally get. I wonder if Paul Reed maybe even like volunteered to do something like this just to have that flexibility. Because if he plays well, like he did against the Jazz, then someone's going to pay him more than this.
Yeah, I really wonder how this all went down behind the scenes. Because I know, like, Omari and the other beat writers, after Paul Reed was waived, they were posting how they just saw him at practice. So, like, I assume he was around the whole time. He knew what was going on. But yeah, those things are super interesting behind the scenes. Maybe one of the beat writers can, like, take us behind that with a story at some point. But yeah, I guess in 2023, Paul Reed was a offer sheet guy. The Utah Jazz extended him an offer sheet, and Philly matched it. So I think that's where all, like, the weird options and clauses in the contract came about. So yeah, I'm sure it's nice as a player to be on something more certain, and then you can prove yourself and have, like, we know other teams want him. The Jazz gave him an offer sheet, and the Pistons were first in the waiver priority, so I'm sure he has some sort of market. So it'll be nice to prove it the rest of the way and play yourself into a new deal, whether it's here or elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, while we're on it, let's take a second and give Paul Reed his flowers, because he played a
Yeah.
fantastic game against Utah. It was 12 points, 2 blocks, 2 steals, 9 rebounds, 6 of 9 from the floor in only 18 minutes. I mean, that I said it earlier, but I truly think him, Marcus Sasser, and Ron Holland, when they came into the game late there, not even late in the first quarter, I think it was early in the second quarter when things really, really shifted kind of on a dime. It was those three guys that were driving it. Paul Reed and Ron Holland in particular were just menaces to the Utah ball handlers. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm not a big single game plus minus guy. I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to
Friends
it.
don't let friends use
Yeah.
single game plus minus play.
But that said, I'm gonna do it just because Paul Reed led the team. And I mean, we saw the crazy, what, like 58 or 48 to 19 first quarter, and then that bench group really helped chew into that lead. And Simone Fontecchio, even though he doesn't jump out to you in the box score, I thought he had a really nice game as well, even when he didn't make a three. So yeah, great game from Paul Reed, made some impact plays and just, like, made things tough for the Jazz in the paint, which wasn't really happening before he got on the floor. So shout out to him. It was a great game.
And it was kind of fun to see Bickerstaff use Reed as more of a trapping big. Sometimes they would even just have him sprint up and trap, not even on a screen, just when the ball went over half court to really cause some havoc. And I think Paul Reed is a little bit more horizontally athletic than maybe Isaiah Stewart or Jalen Duren are. So while Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren are both probably best served to drop coverage to different extents, right? I think Isaiah Stewart's a very good switch big, but his ability in switch, it's primarily because of how long he is. I mean, he's got pterodactyl arms, so he can just eat up space without having to move all that much. Paul Reed is actually pretty quick and moves really well in space. So to get him up in those trapping positions, that's why he had those 2 steals that he did. That just because he can move like that, he can really make it tough on the ball handler. And then when he did get it out on fast break after that steal, he very comfortably went ahead and dunked the ball. So great game. I know we said it, but great game for Paul Reed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought he was just like the ball pressure that him and Holland were providing was huge and forcing some turn. I mean, it was like crazy how just Utah got out on those runs because the Pistons were taking care of the ball and the Jazz weren't. So it was just wild altogether. And I've liked what I've seen from Paul Reed. I kind of want to see him take a couple threes here and there, but like I don't know if that's going to happen, especially with how we've seen Isaiah Stewart be used this year. So, but I don't know. I just kind of hope it would be fun.
Yeah, I thought. Well, I don't know if I really want him taking too many threes. He's got
not too many, just like here and there.
Here and there. Okay. I can get behind it. But it's interesting you brought up the bench unit because I noticed that too. The perimeter defense from the starters was so bad, bad. Like this is a podcast that's been very, very tough on Jalen Duren. I think that this was a game where the mess was already there, and then it just got to Duren, and he didn't fix it, right? Mm-hmm. But like that's not new, and you wouldn't really ask him to fix it. That's not what you really want out of Jalen Duren. So this is not his fault. The first quarter was not his fault. The first quarter was on the entire starting group other than him. SR Thompson only played a few minutes in that first quarter because of foul trouble, but Harris was really rough on defense. I thought Cade Cunningham wasn't great as a perimeter defender, especially when he was out on Lauri Markkanen. Caused a couple of issues, just dominoes falling after that. He gets beat or he's getting buried in the post, so they got to bring a second defender down, and bad things flow from that. And then naturally, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley really struggled too. So when the second unit came in, and you've got guys like Paul Reed, Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, and Simone Fontecchio that are all good defenders, I thought like it was so incredibly noticeable because it's not like the Jazz were just killing the Pistons at the rim. This was all perimeter based. This was all like what YouTube users talked about previously in the past while watching the show in the comment section. So I just really thought the bench's ability to lock up on the perimeter and have Paul Reed play in space as a defender, game changer. It was huge.
Yeah, and I just thought like the options that Utah had, like the Sexton and Keontae George combo was giving them trouble, and they were easy. It was easy for them to like get past whoever was guarding them. But Sar Thompson gets pretty much taken out of the game with his foul trouble and everything. And when he was in it, things were going well. He was making things difficult, and Ron Holland did the same when he came in. And yeah, it was just clear, I guess, like who the tides that were changing, I guess, when the bench unit came in and they were playing next to Cade. The team just like looked better overall, and it was because they were not letting Utah get easy buckets. Like things were a lot less easy to come by. So yeah, I don't know. It's so tough because the starting group has not look great. I think there's some changes that need to happen, and Jaden Ivey is out right now. Isaiah Stewart is out, hopefully back soon. So I'm interested to see what happens when those guys come back. If we do see a tweak, I think we will, but I'm not sure. We haven't really seen many tweaks so far, but I hope so, because I think you can see some of JB's frustrations. I know he was frustrated with the refereeing a lot against Utah, which I agree with him on that. But I think with some of these lineups and how some of the intensity levels are with certain players, so I think there's some sort of change coming. Can't know for sure, but I feel like it has to be the point when this team gets back healthy.
The only thing I want to say on the ref part of things, because I think JB was right to be upset about it. And I'm usually not someone that's going to call out the refs, but this always bothers me. Just as a former player, this always bothered me too. If the refs are allowing things to get really chippy early on in the game, like, let it be really chippy. If it gets too far, you can't like yank the cord all the way back and then start calling everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you made the bed, live in it. Let it be, because now it changes the entire game, how it's played. It changes everything from an on-court perspective. If no longer am I able to like hand check you just a little bit, right? I was getting away with it, and it's not even too bad of a move. Like, it's not too dramatic, but because now we're calling everything and we weren't for 3/4, now it's called here. Like, oh gosh, it's so frustrating. But other than that, I didn't have too much of an issue with the refs. I thought they were lenient both ways, which was interesting. But here's what I did want to say, and also shout out to YouTube user, because I agree with him. He said he vented on Jack's pod yesterday about Caden Assar being disappointing on defense in the Jazz game. Yep, they absolutely were, especially at the start of the game. And the start of the game is why they lost. If anyone didn't watch, they let up 48 points and only scored 19. Blake, they won the rest of the game. 35-19 in the second quarter, 32-30 in the third, 33-29 in the fourth. They won the rest of the game. They just lost that quarter so bad.
Yeah, it was impressive that they like made it interesting at a couple points, but then like when they made it interesting, it would there would be a Jazz run and they would be down 20 yet again. I mean, towards the end, things got, I was like, is there going to be a way that they pull this out? And then that Keontae George like dagger happened, and they did not, the Pistons did not deserve to win that game by the way they started all. Like, you just can't give up that many points to a 5-win team at home when you've had this much time off. So yeah, hopefully it's a wake up call, because you got to win these games. But it was pretty disappointing, even though there were some like comebacks and some exciting things happen along the way. Like, I'm happy it wasn't a brutal rewatch or anything like that. But yeah, just got to start better. There's no other way to say it.
The other important factor of this game was 3-point shooting. The Jazz were 20 of 40. The Pistons 13 of 47. That was huge. Keontae George, though, I did not expect to see this out of him when he came out a couple years ago, and he's a lot of fun. Fun player to watch. Really fun player to watch.
Yeah, that dunk he had on Jalen Duren was,
oh my Lord,
pretty incredible.
I thought he was going to go into the basket at one point.
Yeah, it was insane. Like, I don't know who's going to be in the dunk contest this year. I kind of hope like Ron Holland gets a look.
Or Assar. I think Assar would be
fun. Yeah, Assar would be good too. And he could do some cool, like, I don't know, you got to do all the show things. Like, he has his brother too, or maybe it's the other way around. But Keontae George should definitely be in there too. I like him a lot. I know he's had like a kind of streaky start to year 2, but yeah, he's fun to watch, especially like him in that Sexton combo, and even when Jordan Clarkson is going off more. It's a fun backcourt group in Utah, even though not a lot of things are going right.
Those dunks where it looks like the guy is still elevating when he actually dunks the
Yeah.
ball, like he dunks it and keeps going up. Those
Hmm.
it's just the coolest basketball play, I swear.
Oh yeah.
It looks so cool. And yeah, I would love to see Keontae George in the
That
dunk
was one of the
contest.
best dunks I've seen this year. And like, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
watch every game across the league, but that one was like, I'd be pretty comfortable saying that's at least like top 3 this year.
And the other two might be Jalen Green. Let's
Yeah.
let's stick with Asar Thompson since we just mentioned him as maybe a dunk contest guy. This is from Dave 10.9 miles north of LCA, which talk about other great usernames on the DVB comments. That's one of them. I don't know why it always makes me laugh. But he asks how long until Asar Thompson starts. If he does, would Tobias Harris or Tim Hardaway Jr. move to the bench?
I mean, as difficult as Tobias has been, like I still don't know if you are putting him on the bench. I don't know. I feel like JB might just think it's something that you stick through and hope he turns it around. Hope he gives you what he was signed to bring to this team. And like there have been some games where he's looked good, but I'd say overall it's been pretty underwhelming, like a step below what he's been in recent years. And you hope it's not totally falling off a cliff or anything like that. But yeah, I think like Tim Hardaway Jr., he had a good start to the year and has tapered off a bit and also looked good in some games and kind of he did some bad things, but also willed the Pistons to that win against the Heat. But I just think he's the most likely candidate to go to the bench. I think I don't know. I'm interested to see like when Ivy and Stu are back, like what the starting lineup is gonna look like. Yeah, I'd be interested in a Asar at the 4, Beasley at the 3 lineup, but so you bring Tobias off the bench and start Caden Ivy. Like, what does the rest of it look like? I don't know. I'm not sure what JB is gonna do. I feel like there's some change coming. I just like find it hard to believe that Tobias would come off the bench unless things get a lot worse than they are right now.
Yeah, look, I don't think Harris is going to get benched, and I know he's been a little. It's been tough, especially on the defensive end. I don't think he's been very good, but offensively, he's not that far off from what he was 2 years ago in Philadelphia. So last year was kind of a bounce back for him, where he was at 17 points. Look, yeah, 17 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and shot 48, 35, and then where are we at? 88. The year before that, so it was 14.7 points, 5.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He shot 50% from the floor, 39% from three, and then again 88 from the free throw line. This year it's 13.7, so only 1 point less. 6.9 rebounds, right at that same number, and 2.4 assists. So that's about the same again, right? 2 years ago it was 2.5. Now he's shooting worse from the field. He's at 44%, but he's only making 0.3, looks like, or no, 0.4 less field goals per game. He's only making 0.2 less 3-point attempts per game, even though he's down to 34% from three. Like he's not actually that far off, is all I'm trying to say. So I think his role kind of elevated here. He's being asked to do more than he was asked to do in Philadelphia last season because of the rise of Therese Maxey. So I think Tobias Harris is pretty safe. He's still Tobias Harris, even though he's getting a little bit older and the defense has gone away. So does Tim Hardaway Jr. move to the bench if Asar Thompson's going to start? Maybe. I still think that you really saw at the beginning of that Utah Jazz game that the pairing of Asar and Duran is just crippling offensively. As it's harsh, but I do think that the spacing of that group that started the game was a big reason why they only scored 19 points in the first quarter. To me, the Jazz just didn't guard Asar Thompson from three. And when Jalen Duren was anywhere above the free throw line, they also just didn't guard him, and that killed everything else. So unless there's another move, I personally don't think Asar Thompson's even going to start.
Yeah. You have to just like thread the needle almost, because you have to prioritize defense, but the starting group that was started the season, which doesn't include Asar while he missed time, like your best defenders aren't on the floor. But if your answer is to just simply like put in Asar for Tim Hardaway Jr., then you have those like spacing concerns that you just brought up, and you can't really make things happen on offense. Like, it's more crippling offensively than the benefits that it gives you on the defensive side. So it's just tough. Like, if you put Asar into the starting group, like, do you start Stu? What do you do? I just think JB has to thread a needle. And it's hard because maybe this is the group he wants to go with, but yeah, it's a group that's that's letting the other team get out to a way too strong a start more often than not. So there's a change that needs to happen. And I think it's pretty clear, like, get some of your better defenders in the starting lineup. But once you do that, like, what else do you have to change to make the whole unit click?
Yeah. I mean, I think all of this just kind of goes to why me personally, I don't really think that the starting lineup ought to change at this point. But that being said, I do think that I'm getting very close to saying that one of either Ron Holland or Asar Thompson need to be on the court at all times, just because both of those guys are playing really well. The bad game against Utah notwithstanding for Asar, I think a lot of that had to do with foul trouble. So maybe that's your answer, right? If you really want to change up the starting lineup, maybe you actually put Ron Holland in there at the three instead of Tim Hardaway Jr. Ron Holland has played just fine next to Jalen Duren a few times this year. His shot's not as busted not as bad, I should say, as Asar Thompson's. So maybe you can get away with that. I wonder if that's putting too much on Ron Holland's plate. He's really thriving in this kind of low pressure role right now, and I love that for him. But maybe that's the alternative, right? If you need to get a better defender out there on the wing, then it's not Asar, but it's Ron Holland.
Yeah, it would be nice if Ron made a few more threes to date, but I mean, I agree with you. I think his shot looks better than Asar's, and hopefully, like, they both improve over time. But yeah, and even if you do put Ron Holland in the starting lineup for THJ, like, you don't have to run a ton with that lineup. Like, you can bring Asar up off the bench early, put in Stewart early, whatever it is. It could just be, a Fontecchio YouTube user brings up, like, I thought he's looked better than his start to the season. So that helps with your spacing right there. But yeah, overall, I think just because the starting lineup is tweaked, it doesn't mean you have to live and die by it. Hopefully the changes are better, but you can easily change back. I know it's probably not something that JB wants to do, but always something that can happen.
All right, let's stick with Asar Thompson here for a second. We got an interesting question here from our guy Rames in the comments. It says, what can the Pistons learn from how the Houston Rockets are using Amen Thompson? And then if there's anything we can kind of take from that and apply it to Asar.
Yeah, I think this is a good one. Like, the Rockets and the Pistons, I feel like, can have maybe not a lot of parallels, but you could see maybe they could be on a similar trajectory. Houston obviously started their rebuild with much better assets than the Pistons had, and now they've accumulated this nucleus of young players where they're having this issue where some guys can't even get on the court right now. I just think that the talent alone that they have on this team, whether it's guys that they drafted or guys that they signed through free agency, really help some of the young players. Like, it helps them not put too much on their plate. And like, if they're going off whatever, like, they have the runway to do that. I think with Amen specifically, like, they're different players. Like, I think Amen's always going to have a little more on-ball juice, even though Asar is a crazy athlete. Like, Amen is better and a bit more explosive, but Asar is a much better defender. So they're just different players. But yeah, I mean, I think Amen kind of just fills the stat sheet and makes things happen. Both he can as a scorer and as a playmaker, and then he can make defensive plays too. So I think it's almost a cop-out answer to just say, like, put more talent around them and it will help. But I think that'll come over time, and depending on what the changes are that Trajan Langdon make, like what moves he makes, I think that'll come in. And I mean, honestly, it's just hopefully playing next to players who can shoot the ball for now, while hopefully that skill, because I feel like in Houston it's a lot easier to hide Amen's shooting than sometimes it seems in Detroit. And maybe that's just like a bias I have because I watch the Pistons a lot more than the Rockets, and I think neither of them are ever going to be average or above average shooters. But yeah, you just can't play. Like, hopefully you can find a floor spacing center essentially, and I know that's not easy to find, but it really helps overall.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think long term that's absolutely the trick, right? If he's going to be a big time starter, then that's something you want to find. I think, he can make it, or sorry, that is, can make it so that it's worth it to invest or to seek out that kind of big. So I think that's on the table. In terms of how they're being used, the one thing that I want to bring up is something you brought up and has been brought up here in the live chat by a couple of people. But Amen Thompson is just a much better on-ball player than Asar Thompson is. I understand that, like, if you go back to OTE, they both averaged similar amounts of assists. Like, I understand that their box scores can look similar at times. They're very different players. They play very different games. And Amen Thompson is used much more on the ball. So I was even able to see this here in NBA's tracking data. So if you want to take a look, you guys can go find this too. But for Asar Thompson, only 24%-ish of his field goal attempts come on more than 3 dribbles. Only 24%. For Amen Thompson, that number is up over 34. Okay. Amen Thompson is averaging, let's see where I could pull it. 1.8 turnovers per game this year. It was at 1.5 last year, right? And again, he's handling the ball a lot more than Asar Thompson is. Asar Thompson is averaging right now, though it's a small sample, 1.5, and last year it was 1.3. So again, they're very close, right? But Amen Thompson, you could put in a dribble handoff action, or you could put on a high pick and roll, and he's going to make something happen out of it. You can't really do that with Asar Thompson. I think they're both pretty effective in the fast break. And I would like to see Asar Thompson used as a ball handler in the fast break a little bit more than he has been so far. But even then, when we've seen it this year, he's had some pretty bad turnovers when he's done it. So YouTube user says nothing good happens when Asar dribbles more than 3 times in the half court. Harsh, but generally true, where it's not true with Amen. I think you just got to look at him a little bit different, right? Amen Thompson, you could play at the point guard spot if you really wanted to. Houston's in a kind of a luxury position where they don't have to, so they can use him as more of that combo guard or like point forward position. Whereas Asar Thompson he's like a connective passer. He's really good with his one mores, or if he's on a cut or in a short roll, which is something they've been doing with him more often. using him as a screener. Like, he's a great short roll passer. He's a great passer off 1 or 2 dribbles, like just catch and read and go. And so I would like to use him more in those situations where he's maybe a cutter, he is in the short roll, where he's already moving, and then is just being asked to make a play off of 1 or 2 dribbles, rather than with what Houston does or tends to do with them.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add is like why Asar was the MVP and was like a scorer and got all these awards in OTEs because Amen was passing him the ball, and he was serving as the point guard, and Asar was serving as like the play finisher. So, yeah, I think you just have to look at them differently, like as different players because they are. And have to shout out this comment from Mateus. Sorry if I butchered your name at all, but he said, shout out from Brazil. Love you guys. Go Pistons, even when it drives me crazy since 03. Shout out to you for joining us all the way down in Brazil. We love you too.
Yeah, that's so cool. This is just going to be kind of an international episode, I think, because we're going to go here to a voicemail question from Evan, who's calling from Canada.
Go to the north
Blake
now.
And Wes. Good to chat with you guys. This is Evan calling from London, Ontario, Canada. I just am calling about Jaden Ivey. So I've been watching him the last few weeks, and obviously he's had a bit of a downturn after an awesome start to the season. It's got me thinking a lot about like the difference between role players and stars. Like when you look at where Ivey was drafted, 5th overall, high expectations, high ceiling, and the high end of him has been really unbelievable, right? But then you look at him lately, and I realize I'm getting ahead of myself, but I start wondering to myself, what if he's not, an elevator? What if he's not a building block, I guess? And so that leads to my question. I guess my question is, does Jaden Ivey have what it takes? If this, like, let's say the current trend continues, he stays as like an okay 3-point shooter, he stays streaky, he's on again, off again. Does he have what it takes to be a 3-point, to be a role player if he's not a building block? If he's not like a guy on your team, can he be okay? Does he have what it takes? And what does that even look like? So I hope that's clear. I know there's like 3 questions mixed in there, but do with it what you like. But that's my thoughts. Take care, all.
All right, Blake. So I guess if I could sum it up, who is Jaden Ivey?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I mean, really made me think a lot about what he will be moving forward on this team. I mean, what his future will be with this team in general. I think right now, I'm not for certain, but I'm pretty close to for certain that Jaden Ivey won't ever be, the number 2 to Cade's number 1, and this team will go on to contend or win a playoff series, whatever it might be. I think that said, Jaden Ivey could still play a pretty crucial and needed role on this team, but like I think he can be a role player. Just the thing is, like Evan brought up here, he absolutely needs to stay an okay 3-point shooter. Ideally, he's at average or above average, ideally, and he needs to improve as a defender. And then whether it's a player that you have in your starting lineup as your 4th or 5th option, or coming off the bench as your 1st or 2nd option, like I think he could definitely do that, and I think he complements what Cade brings pretty well, just because they do different things and pack a different punch. So, I mean, I think if current Jaden Ivey, like the streakiness, the okay 3-point shooting continues, and that's just what he is, I think he could still have a place on this team. But it's like if you sign him to an extension, it has to be a pretty team friendly deal, because if that's the case, you're still looking and have to pay whoever your number 2 guy is. Like if it's Ron Holland, you'll still have to pay him in a couple of years. Or if you go out and get someone on the trade market, like you have to pay them. So, yeah, I think if that's what Jaden Ivey's willing to do, or maybe he wants to play it out and go in and see if he could pop elsewhere. So in short, I know it was a great question, very like thought provoking, but in general, I think he could be a role player. It's just like, will it work out that way? Is my question.
Well, I think something that I've been wrestling, I guess, a little bit with this too, I would say. And where I'm kind of finding myself falling into is I think Jaden Ivey has proven that he is a quality NBA player. So you're not, there's no conversation about that anymore with him. Like this isn't a Killian Hayes thing. You're looking at Jaden Ivey and it's a question of, how much are we comfortable paying him? Not if we're comfortable paying him at all. So that's a good thing. He's already established that, and that's fantastic. I think if he continues this progression, right, where he's still streaky, but he's still an all right 3-point shooter. He's still a pretty good scorer. He'll get to the line, but it's a little bit of a roller coaster, and he's a good secondary creator. That, to me, has the upside of a guy who you're really happy with as the fourth option on a good team, but who's underqualified as a third option, right? So it's kind of like a tweener in that way. And you bring up a good point with the money because it seems like, now I don't know if this is going to be true with the new CBA, but it seems like in the past that those guys tend to go to lesser teams to get bigger roles and more money, right? So if that is Jaden Ivey, I also wonder if it's a situation where maybe he does want to not sign an extension and go on and play somewhere else where he can actually be elevated up to legitimately that number 2 or number 3 role on a playoff team, or more aptly a play-in team with a little bit more support structure around him. I wonder if that might be something that eventually he pushes for. Not on this particular contract because of the restricted free agency rights, but next go around, right? Long term, looking at where he might be in the future. Because like I'm captain of the Jaden Ivey fan club. I think he's played very well this year. I know it's been a little bit of a downturn, but I still think he's got a lot that he can unlock, especially if after he comes back from this injury, he gets a little bit more aggressive and hunting his own shot at the rim. But I agree with you. I don't think he's a number 2 scoring option. I think in the best world, he's probably overqualified as a number 4 because of what he can do playmaking wise for others. And those guys tend to get paid a lot of money by lesser teams to be their 2 or 3. So I don't know. Long answer. There's no definitive endpoint to that, but that would be my answer. I think if he continues this progression from what I've seen, I think that's where he ends up. I'm not 100% confident that's in Detroit long term, but I think that's the type of guy he can be. And that's still a really, really good player, by the way.
Yeah, and only thing I'll add is I think just like just from how he plays, like I feel like he's a guy who wants to be in a winning situation. Like I could maybe see him betting on himself and taking a shorter term deal at a lesser team just to see if he can take that next step and prove himself in a different situation. But if it doesn't go that way, like I feel like he's a guy who wants to win and would go to a contender and like want to take that route as opposed to just being a guy who can put up 25 points a night and for a team that's not competing or anything like that. And if he does stay in Detroit for the long haul and he is a third, fourth, maybe even fifth option, and he's like overqualified in the role that he has, like that's a great problem to have. So, I mean, I hope it works out for him here. I just think it's a little bit on like the rest of the season once he's back is going to be super important, obviously.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. I'm very confident it's going to work out for him individually. I just hope that it's here in Detroit. I think that's where I'm at with him. Shout out to Jay Wow 33. This is a great show, guys. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you again to Mateus too. I think he said that Mateus is Matthew, in Portuguese, which is cool. I didn't know that. Let's get to this live question from, I don't even know how to say that first word, Pathfinder. I'll just call you Pathfinder. Apologies. Does Duren have enough trade value to go after a stretch big?
In short, I mean, I'll say like no. I think the only thing that I feel like it's just not a 1-for-1 trade, right? Like if the Pistons are acquiring a stretch center, the team who's trading them will probably want draft capital. If they don't, if the Pistons aren't willing to do that and the trade's still on the table, then the team is probably going to want a young player to take a shot on. Like, I don't think Jalen Duren's the first one that the other team will want. I think he might be one of the handful that the Pistons would be willing to deal. But that's it. Like, Nikola Vucevic is the example here. Like, would the Bulls want to take a shot on Jalen Duren?
Not alone.
Yeah, I think they would need draft capital with it. But I don't know. They traded Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. So I don't know. I just think the potential path for a deal would have to include other stuff. And I don't know if the Pistons are trading for a stretch center if Jalen Duren's included in the trade at all.
Well, I always love how these questions can be worded sometimes when we get to this point of the year. Like, does Jalen Duren have enough trade value to net a stretch big? Yeah, how bad's the stretch big? Right? Like, are we asking about a guy who is a career backup and a vet, and you could maybe send Duren and get back that backup big who could shoot threes a little bit in the second round pick? Yeah, I think that could happen. If we start going up to Vucevic, then no. I think even a guy that we talked about last week in Jonas Valanciunas, I think you would have to attach something to Jalen Duren, not large, but something to it, to then get him into the Pistons training room. So, look, I think we've had this discussion on the podcast before. I can't say for certain, but if you guys just go and look at NBA rosters right now, and you try to abstract for a second, you say, okay, which teams would want a young big who can't shoot, isn't a good defender, but is a very good offensive rebounder? And there's just not a lot of teams that probably want to pay for that right now. So it's a tough position, I think, in general.
Yeah, I think there will be someone who would want to take a shot, but it's like, what's the value? And really, that's the question for anyone who's potentially on the trade market.
Well, if it's another team just wanting to take a swing, then you're talking 2 second-round picks, right? You're not talking anything exciting.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I'm interested to know what a lot of people's value would be, but you don't know until they get traded, unfortunately. So,
yeah, exactly. All right, let's wrap up with these two. This is from our guy KCP43. Says, what are your thoughts on a more conservative off-season plan this upcoming offseason from Trajan Langdon? Maybe just a few mid-level contracts that could be aggregated to flip for a star later on when that becomes available. So what would you think about one more offseason of kind of playing it slow?
Yeah, I feel like it's the more likely outcome. I don't think the Pistons will get a high profile free agent to just sign with them outright, and I'm not sure that there's really any out there. So yeah, I think more than likely you're going to get a few role player signings, and then potentially if Langdon thinks that they're in a spot to take a swing and a star type player who can score becomes available and it makes sense and the Pistons have a deal. I mean, I'm kind of worried about this draft pick though. When is that going to convey, and when will the Pistons have more flexibility to be able to trade their own first? Because that's what teams want when you trade for a star type player. But yeah, I think just in general, there will probably be some sort of trade to acquire a number 2 or maybe even number 1 or number 3 when that comes up. I just think that's what we've seen in the past for how the Pistons like go about and get their guy or get that 1 or 2 missing pieces. Yeah, in general, I don't think you're going to see a like big fish sign in Detroit, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a path to build this roster into a contender.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that there's one more offseason of kind of slow playing it, see what you can get out of the draft, see what kind of steps next season Asar Thompson, Ron Holland both individually take. And then, at next year's trade deadline is when like this Brandon Ingram conversation that's come up a couple of times already so far this year, like then it makes a lot more sense, right? When you're just a little farther on, you not only have Ron Holland, you not only have Asar Thompson, who you feel pretty confident in at least being a really good defensive wing that you can have in the rotation somewhere. You've also got another top end pick here that you just drafted this upcoming offseason. And then based on all of that, you go, okay, like now we're going to trade it all in and we're going to cash in some assets and get someone, right? We're going to upgrade somewhere, get Cade his running mate, and then try to build it out from there and accelerate the timeline, right? That makes a lot more sense, I think, to me at this point than doing it this trade deadline, which I know is tough because the team's been bad for a long time. But Langdon just got here, right? He just got here. So he's only been bad for, 3 months at this point, not any longer than that. So I agree with you. I think that not only would I be okay with it, I also kind of think that's just the most likely outcome at this point.
Yeah, and Mateus brings up a good point in the chat too. Like Tobias Harris's contract next year might be attractive to put in a trade. I mean, I'm not sure there's many teams that will want like Tobias Harris the player, but if you're like his contract will be expiring and you have to make the money work, like that's $26 million right there to put in a trade. So like I don't think we'd see Tobias in a trade this year by any means, but I think next year if there's something on the table, like that's a big chunk of money that gets you closer to where you need to be.
Yeah, and I mean you're looking at Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren potentially not having extensions yet by this point next year. That's possible. So that could be a valuable, potentially valuable, especially in the case of Jaden Ivey, of hey, like we'll trade Tobias Harris as kind of a salary dump for you to make the numbers match, but then you could also get this guy and Jaden Ivey who you'll have restricted free agents rights to. That could be big. Order of the Blazing Horse says that was Trojan's plan all along with that 2-year deal with Tobias Harris. I could absolutely see that. So yeah, I think next trade deadline, that's the target. We're going to make a swing. We're going to try to get somebody to come in and really elevate this core that they've built up. Let's end on this one. Quick one. This is from JMax 760. What do you think the odds are of Cade Cunningham making the All-Star game this year? And Blake, let me just ask you, is it not 100%?
If it's not, it has to be like 90 to 95. Like, I don't think he's going to be a starter by any means, pretty much only because of the team that he plays on and just the pool of stars that are in this conference. But I think if he's not named a reserve, he'll for sure be the next one up if there is an injury replacement, which there always is. So, like, I mean, I think he should 100% be in that reserve group. But, man, if he gets snubbed from that, I can only imagine what the discourse would be. But I would be shocked if he doesn't find his way on this all-star team one way or the other.
Yeah, me too. I think it's 100%. I mean, look, 24 points, 7 rebounds, 9.7 assists. He's slashing 46 from the floor, 39 from 3, and 79 from the free throw line. His effective field goal percentage is 52, which is good for a guard, and his player efficiency rating's up near 20. Like, that's an all-star guard. I don't know how else you could really put that.
And I'm pretty confident to say that by the All-Star break, he will be the cog, the lead, like the guy for this Pistons team that will at least be at or eclipse the amount of wins that they had last season. And like, that's not super hard, but like, it's kind of like a cool thing to say, like by the All-Star break. So
yeah, absolutely. And then like, if you're even looking just narratively, all that the Pistons did this past offseason was bring in a couple of veterans that help space the floor. That was it.
Yeah.
Like, and Ron
their
Holland.
Defense is still what
it's
it is.
Still
like,
bad.
You don't have like, it's not like he got a new Robin to his Batman or anything like that. Like,
exactly.
So, yeah.
Like Jaden Ivey's numbers aren't that different from what they were his previous 2 seasons. They've improved, but they're not like that different. He's now up to almost 10 assists a game. His rebounds took a big jump. Like, yeah, he's doing everything. And then Order of the Placing Horse says every away broadcast has declared him an all-star. So it's
I need to watch more of those.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. It says also, let's not forget the national highlight moments, the primetime blocks. Yeah, those are huge too. He had the game against, I think it was Atlanta, right, with the game winner and the game-winning block.
Yeah. And then the Madison Square Garden triple-double.
Yeah, he's had some big high-profile games.
Like the 18 assists.
Against Miami, right? The NBA account on Twitter is advertising the replay of that game because Butler and Cade Cunningham go off for crazy triple-doubles. Like, that's where you're at now with Cade Cunningham. We've got a star. If nothing else, Pistons fans, we've got a star, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and you're former number 1 overall pick. The narrative is there. He has the credentials and everything. So yeah, he has to be on it. But all right, Wes, I appreciate you sticking this out when you're under the weather. I'm not gonna make you stress your voice out anymore. So appreciate you and
thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Oh man, you just used the voice a little bit more. You didn't have to do that, but. Shout out to everyone who joined us in the live chat and for asking questions, and shout out to Evan for using the voice line. A reminder, anyone can call our number to ask a question, hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. Just a reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. Leave us a review on any podcast platform you're listening to us on. And special thanks to Sean Korp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.